Pitcher Nail Down. I'm Jason Gilbo, JGilbo11. Happy 4th of July. I will be taking a look at pitchers on DraftKings and FanDuel today. Looking at the early only games, the first 10 or 9, depending on what site you are on. Early only on FanDuel doesn't have the Angels and Rays game, but DraftKings early only, the main slate there does. Just looking at those, not really looking at the 4 games outside later in the evening, taking a look at the heftier slate. So, jumping right into things, Angels and Rays, and once again, you won't see these two pitchers on FanDuel, but DraftKings you will. Nick Tropiano versus Matt Moore, over-under of 8. Tampa Bay minus 140 favorites, and Tropiano 9,200 there. Pretty expensive. Matt Moore 7,200, a little bit of a discount. Tropiano called back up. He's a guy who's had a decent strikeout rate this year, 22%. Going to go up against a Rays team that strikes out quite a bit, 25% against righties. They ranked 25th in WOBA. They haven't been great this year, especially against right-handers. Tropicana, decent place to pitch. Obviously, Tropiano a GPP play only, 11.5% walk rate this year. That's something you don't really like to see. Gives up a ton of hard ball contact as well, 35%. Pretty low ground ball rate. But, I mean, you do like the 12.8 swing strike rate. There is some upside there, and he always can kind of balance it out. If he gives up 2 to 3 earned runs, he can balance it out with some strikeouts. The one thing for him, he never really goes tremendously deep into games. 5-6 innings is about what you're going to get out of him, and usually we have looked at him in the past, but it's also always been at a cheaper price tag. So you're going to be asking a lot of him here, I think, because of the slate and the way it shapes out. Tropiano's not a bad GPP option, but obviously there is some risk there. And as far as Matt Moore goes, the Angels offense, they don't really strike out a ton, and I think there are a couple of right-handers that are going to keep me off of Moore. So really not looking at him on DraftKings at all. I think there are kind of better, cheaper options that you can target with. So Rangers and Red Sox next one here. You got Nick Martinez versus Rick Porcello, 10.5 over under. Boston minus 160 favorites. Porcello, not a guy I'm really looking at. I know his price tag is a little bit depreciated, coming off a strong start against Tampa, as many pitchers have. Rangers offense, once again, not a big strikeout candidates. And you look at, pretty middle of the road against right-handers, below 20% strikeout rate. They don't walk a ton either. Porcello's not necessarily a guy I'm looking to pick on, kind of as a full go with the Texas offense. But as far as pricing goes, I'm not really on him, and especially on FanDuel where he's 8,700. Not a big fan of that price tag. Obviously, I think he could have a decent start, but for me, he's just kind of a bland pitcher. Doesn't really get much out of him. You kind of only look to use him in better matchups than this. So I think it's kind of stay away. And same thing with Nick Martinez. Obviously, you're going to stay away from him against this Red Sox offense. Yankees and White Sox, CC Sabathia, James Shields, and CC Sabathia is a guy we've been talking about regression for, mainly on the slate breakdowns, and that's finally come. Not looking at him here, really. I know this White Sox offense really hasn't been great, but you're looking at 11 runs over the last 2 starts, for CC Sabathia, and that regression's come. And I think, obviously you're not going to get 6 runs every time he comes out there, but I think the White Sox, yeah, the strikeout rate's pretty high, but they do have some right-handed bats that can get to CC, and I think that's going to happen. White Sox have been better against lefties and righties this year, 12th in WOBA, so kind of a stay-away situation, and the same thing goes with Shields. Shields did pitch better his last time out. Obviously, he's super cheap on DraftKings at 4,600, but he's cheap for a reason, and that's because he's going to face a ton of lefties, and that's been his kryptonite so far. Obviously in Chicago, and it's been that way in Petco as well. So when he was there, still struggling against lefties, and it's just kind of a stay-away situation. I think both sides is pretty intriguing for offense. Athletics and Twins here, Kendall Graveman versus Ricky Nolasco. Both these guys are just stayaways. We can move on right from them. You can also look at both those offenses as a target and feel pretty comfortable 1 through 5. Graveman's been poor. Nolasco's been poor. But there's a reason why this is a 9.5 over-under. So with no real strong favorite, you can also just kind of stay away. Mariners and Astros, and Wade Miley versus Lance McCullers, 8.5 over-under. Houston minus 155 favorites. McCullers, it's really tough to pick on this Seattle offense. McCullers is a quality arm. I'm not exactly targeting him, but I think they just kind of wash each other out. I don't see a ton of upside for that price tag. $8,800 on DraftKings is a little expensive for me. 87 on FanDuel, so I'm kind of staying away. I like other options in the area. Guys like Kyle Hendricks aren't priced entirely too much higher, especially on FanDuel there. So I think you can kind of play it safe and even go with some other options that are in better spots. So once again, not really looking to target McCullers against him, but not really looking to use him either. And Wade Miley, not really looking here outside of Safeco. Home run prone at times, right-handers pretty average against. So I'm looking to take some Houston bats, and some of them come at a pretty nice price tag on FanDuel, but they're also a little bit expensive on DraftKings. So overall, I think you can kind of stay away and look to more so target Miley there. John Neese, Carlos Martinez, 8.5 over under, St. Louis minus 180 favorites. So Carlos Martinez, pretty big favorite. Martinez has pitched pretty well of late. Coming off a decent outing, where he was relatively, in tough matchups the last few days. And you look, he's had a pretty nice stretch, including a start against Pittsburgh where he nearly threw a complete game, went 8 1/3 there. 1 earned, 6-5 strikeouts. Sorry, not 6. Strikeouts really haven't been a thing for him this year, but I think pitching deep into games has really been nice. 7 innings in 3 of the last 4 starts plus there. So against KC, 6 strong innings with 3 Ks. Didn't pick up a win. But I think here you look at this Pirates offense, it's really trending downwards. You got McCutchen that's struggling, Marte that's struggling, Polanco that's kind of come back down to earth. And you just look at this Pirates offense, continues to slip. The strikeout rate's been high. I like Martinez here as a home favorite. I think he's a solid option in all formats. Reasonably priced, $8,900. I don't mind pairing him up with the Hendricks and kind of going that route in cash. For me, he's still kind of a GPP option on FanDuel. Hendricks still kind of takes the cake there at 9,200, so just 300 more getting a weak Cincinnati offense. Hendricks is kind of just a cash game play for me, while everyone else kind of falls off into a GPP format. So that's kind of my take on FanDuel, which I'll get into Hendricks a little bit more. Neese goes, no for me, lefty against the Cardinals. I know the lefty's situation is, you look at some of those right-handed bats, it's intriguing for the Cardinals, but they're not that great against lefties. 24th in WOBA, 21% strikeout rate, but John Neese isn't good enough to make me look at him as a GPP option. Rockies and Giants in AT&T. It's not in Coors. You got Anderson and Peavy going. Over-under of 8. San Francisco minus 145 favorites there. I know the Coors bats are outside of Coors, but it's obviously a stay-away situation on both sides. Look at this Giants offense. It's a little bit battered, but Anderson's still not a guy I'm really comfortable rolling out against the Giants, who don't have a high strikeout rate, have hit lefties pretty well. So for me, stay-away situation even in that spacious ballpark. Braves, Phillies, De La Cruz versus Eichhoff, over-under of 8.5, Philly minus 150 favorites. Eichhoff at a higher price tag than I kind of like, 8,400 on both sides there. So obviously just a GPP play for me. Struggles with left-handed bats, which Atlanta does bring a couple to the table, so he can run into some trouble. He's had 2 starts against Atlanta this year, has done okay. Nothing that's quite kind of blows you off and puts him on your radar. I mean, only 5 strikeouts in 11 1/3 innings there, 3 earned runs. He has pitched better at home. That's one thing that is a plus for him. 2.41 ERA there. Strikeout rate has been up a little bit at home. Obviously, I do think the Phillies going to come away with a win there. They are decent favorites, so Eichhoff is a GPP option, but I do think his floor is actually pretty low, even against an Atlanta offense that doesn't strike out a ton. And you also just look at them that they do bring a couple lefties to the table, so he could run into a little bit of trouble. So that is one thing to keep in mind. I know De La Cruz is facing the Phillies, but obviously I like this Phillies offense actually more so than actually using De La Cruz against them. So he's just a stay-away situation for me. Last game of the early slate, you got the Marlins and Mets. Tom Kohler versus Matt Harvey, 7.5 over-under. Mets minus 150 favorites. Harvey kind of back to his cheap self because he really hasn't been that great. And he's also going up against a Miami offense that's been pretty solid. You're looking against right-handed pitching, 13th in the league. Stanton's starting to heat up. They don't strike out a ton. At the 7K price tag, though, Harvey is obviously in play because I do think he has a win. And obviously, you don't need huge strikeout potential from Harvey at that price. If he was another 1,000 higher, another 15 higher, sure. Just kind of like how he is over on FanDuel, where he's 8,400. You're going to need a little bit more strikeout upside for that price tag. And obviously, the win, you're going to need too. I do think that's there. But Harvey, obviously not an attractive option anymore. I do think you can kind of look other ways tonight, and I think it's pretty slim pickings. And obviously, Harvey's going to carry some name. He's going to carry a little bit of ownership to him, but obviously, don't expect too much out of him. I do think a 10 to 15 DK point outing could be possible. I just, I don't see him kind of generating, 7, 8 strikeouts here, unless he really turns back the clock to really last season when he was, kind of that usual self. But you just look, over the last 10 starts, he's really hasn't had a ton of K potential. Yes, against the Brewers, as many have had that great start against the White Sox. So winless really since May, and that's a big issue for me. So he definitely needs to get that win on FanDuel to really carry that weight. And I do think with the lack of strikeout upside, needs to as well on DraftKings. After the Mets have kind of fallen short on offense, a big series versus the Cubs. I'm not really looking at Kohler. Obviously, he's not a solid arm anyway. So maybe if the Mets were kind of trending downwards, even towards the Cubs series, and didn't come out and put up crooked numbers all 3 games, you might look at Kohler as a cheap option. But I really don't think so on this slate. Not enough really juice for me from Kohler to consider. That's going to wrap things up here with the pitcher nail down. Be sure to check out dailyfantasycafe.com for all the great tools and content.